you see the countdown?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. I'm here with Sarab Mish, Mishra.
Yeah.
He's from a company called ThreadUp, and I was just kind of looking through his profile. He's got some really unique experience. Um, Data engineer, so intern to data engineer to senior data engineer, and then to staff software engineer, um, which a lot of times in data we think that we can't really keep moving up, and he's done that. There's a lot of the things that I saw on his profile that just make him a really interesting person. I'm really excited to hear what he has to say, kind of get to meet him a little bit. With that, I will turn the time over to him.
Thank you, Ro, for such a cool introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Saurabh, and today I'm going to actually talk about my experience within the event tracking domain. I've spent quite amount of time here, and had my own ups and lows about doing it the right way, the wrong way, and learning from my mistakes. And in pretty recent time, I think in the last couple of years, I've figured out I think so. I've cracked the code. I've figured out how to do it the right way, and I'm seeing a lot of success. And that's why I thought that okay, I'll present my learnings with you all so that you all can benefit from. So here's my formal introduction. I'm working as a staff engineer at ThreadUp, and ThreadUp is a cool company to work with. So what we essentially do is we are a managed marketplace for that offers apparel resale, specifically for women's and kids' clothes. And what that means is that if if you are someone who has a lot of clothes that you are not in a mood to wear, you can actually put all those clothes in a bag and keep it outside your doorstep, and we do all the heavy lifting from there. We'll bring that bag into our warehouse, we'll click photographs, we'll do the sizing, we'll write all the descriptions and put that on our website, so that the buyers on our website, they get a really wide collection of items to buy from. And it's kind of beautiful in a way that the buyers are getting the experience of literally buying new they are getting the experience of buying new clothes, but they are in truth they are actually buying used clothes, which offers a lot of value to them, and it also helps them to find some treasure hunt and vintage collection, which have been very helpful for us. And there's an internal saying in ThreadUp that you are here to do the best work of your life. And that's what my personal experience has been. I got the opportunity to modernize the entire product analytics data platform, like coming up with a tracking plan, figuring out how the event collector would look like, how it would process event, building real-time data sets, creating batch data sets. And I credit all my transformational learnings that I got for all the work I've done in this domain. And in my spare time, I'm trying to figure out how to be a good father to a cute toddler. And being in the data engineering space, that's a big incentive for me to keep my pipelines running healthy so that I can spend quality time with my family. So, enough about me. I'd like to introduce you to someone whom you all can relate to. Meet Jay Joyner. He is the guy we all aspire to be as a data engineer. He's a data wrangling champion, be it flat files or structured, unstructured data, whatever data, real time data, he knows how to process and work with that. Not only that, like Jay has a good habit of adding unit test cases to all his pipelines. And plus, he writes all the audit checks, which he wants that so that after every run, he gets a report, and so that okay, all the output meets his expectation that he has set. And if you can notice, the smile on his face is because he just finished writing a cool pipeline and finished backfilling all the data, and he is just off to spend his weekend before he starts a new project the next week. Uh, by knowing all the things that Jay has been doing, Could you all predict that if Jay is supposed to resume work on Monday, how his Monday would start? And I would like you to answer this poll for me.
So there might be a little bit of a delay in the response. And if you're
Mhm.
not seeing the poll, you need to go over to the poll tab. And there's two choices. And I don't know if everyone else can see in the chat. Let me know if you can see how many. So far we have, I can see the results of the voting in real time. I'm curious if everyone else can.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's almost 50-50,
It
but
was bouncing around. It was like, it was how it should have started and how it really started.
yeah. uh, okay, I think it has stabilized now, so I'll end the poll. Um, oh, wait. Okay, I'll end the poll, but the results is, I would say it's just 50-50. Um, Honestly, I didn't expect I'll get this kind of response. um, but what I'm trying to the reason I wanted to ask this question is that if you know that you have done all the right things for your pipeline to work, how would you predict your next day should be? It's good to expect that everything should be working fine, but there's one thing that can happen, and that happens pretty often for data engineers, is the upstream data can change without you being knowing about that. And for that reason, even if you follow everything what's there in the book, uh, you can end up having bad days. And Jay experienced the same on Monday when he joined the office. He saw that all his pipeline, which was running fine till Friday, on Monday, it started failing. And like every other data engineer, he succumbed to that failure. He thought that, okay, just Monday is just a bad day. He started context switching and he resumed his new project. And parallelly, he was also fixing his pipeline. So if it is happening once in a blue moon type of a thing, that's fine. But week over week, these kind of things started happening, and context switching became like a daily struggle for Jay. And towards the end of the quarter, when he was supposed to finish all his work, he realized that he's going to kind of miss his deadlines. And that is when, being a talented and an ambitious engineer, he thought that, okay, even if I'm doing all the things, looks like I'm still missing on a lot of things that can be done, and there's a scope of improvement the way I work. And that led Jay into thinking about and then, like, from the first principle thinking route, like to understand and break things down exactly what he consumes, from where all that data is coming from, so that he can at least understand the problem. uh, and that is what his thinking exercise led him to realize, is that the the challenge that he faced was, in order to create a record of complete information, he had to query multiple data sources. And because those multiple data sources were structured in a different way, he had to write like a complex transformation logic on top of it. And if you see, if what's kind of like from all the touch points that Jay is touching, there are so many different pieces here. It's not only about the different data sources, but then in order to combine everything together, the transformation logic also gets complicated. So every single touch point you have over there is a point of failure. And because you have so many point of failures, you end up having surprises on Monday or late nights and whatnot. So Jay started thinking of, okay, it's a good thing that at least he identified the pattern, because once you identify the pattern and the problem, you can focus on it and think a solution about that. And Jay started thinking, and he kind of connected all the dots together and found a solution. Now, although the title gives away what the solution is about, but then there are four pillars, I would say, that I'll try to kind of share. I'm trying to kind of convince why this is a good solution. And the first aspect of the solution is decoupling. And the premise of decoupling your data is pretty much you can tie it back to the traditional dimensional data modeling. The reason we did those kind of things is because um, the data which is stored in your applications database, that data is structured for your applications to work, and it's not structured for your analytical queries. And for that reason, you move that data into data warehouses, you restructure them into dimensional and fact tables and the one big table formats, so that you can run your analytical queries on top of it. So uh, if we extend that premise and say that if you decouple the raw data itself, your input feed, so that you are able to create a logical separation, that this is your transactional data for operations, and this is your a new feed of information purely designed for analytics. If you're able to do that, will shield the problem of upstream changes impacting the analytical feed. And if I ask you to create a new feed of information, um, like the first question would come is, okay, how would you capture this new feed of information? And that is where in the past decade or so, there has been so much of technological improvements in the event collection and processing mechanism, that technically it's a solved problem. You can capture and process millions and billions of event, like without even kind of breaking your head on the wall. That's a solved problem. So you can use events to capture your this new feed. And because now this is a logically separated feed, you have a lot of control over what information you're trying to capture, which means that in a transactional feed, if you're only getting foreign keys and couple of values, here you can actually request the data producers to add so much, like add a lot of contextual information in this feed, which will eventually help you to simplify your post-processing logic. And the benefit of this post-processing logic would be a lot of the avoidable lookups would get solved simply because of the contextualization of your events. And all these three things, like decoupling using events, and then simplifying the processing using context, these can be achieved if we are able to systematically specify the specs for the data producers, which will add clarity and avoid any kind of confusion, that what need to be sent, how it needs to be sent. Everything can be captured in a data contract, so that the data producers would have complete clarity. And if they're making any changes, uh, their code implementation would tell them that, look, if you're going to make this kind of a change, the following data contract would breach. And at least it will avoid any kind of surprising problems that like data engineers face a lot of times. And one another, I'd say, the side effect to choosing events as your input feed is that uh, in these time, it's I think I don't have to emphasize a lot, but if you look at when you were only analyzing on the transactional data, there's a limit to the insights that you can grasp from this transactional data. But events unblocks that problem, uh, because I'm primarily from the e-commerce domain. Understanding, for me, the transactional data most of the times is the purchase data, only the purchase data. And uh, but then when a customer comes on our website, the customer can enter search keywords that where the person can view an item, the person can scroll to a particular item, it can click an item, add to cart an item, and do so many things, that if we are able to record that information in a highly contextualized manner, we are able to understand what's the intent of the user. And once I understand what's the intent of the user, I can power a lot of personalization use cases. And if I know the user is kind of confused, I can at least come up with some real time interventions and eventually make some predictive decisions. If I feel that, okay, the person did not make a purchase, maybe the pricing was not right, so I can at least throw in a discount over there to get the person to purchase that item. So, by choosing events as your source of this feed, we uncover the opportunity to capture a lot of about the user intent, which eventually ties back to collecting the data, which will help us to uncover actionable insights. Uh, I'm a I'm kind of a practical learner, so I'll walk you through one example of how I have crafted a data contract. And this is this is about a time when ThreadUp did not have a feature to favorite an item, and I'll kind of walk you through how it came into existence and all that. So, quite a few years ago, we noticed that a lot of customers were adding a lot of items into their cart. Like you can imagine, 30 to 50 items were sitting in cart, but they were not making any purchases. And part of the reason was ThreadUp being like, because we are operating in a resale environment, we only have one unit of an item. And to give a fair chance to every buyer, we have strict cart timers which will drop those items back. And once those items have been dropped back, it's difficult to rediscover those items from the other 5 million items that are there on the website. So, because of the gap in the product, we were facing a significant drop in the order conversion rate that we could have achieved. So, the product managers, they thought of launching a feature to favorite these items. And this simple feature is kind of the one of the most popular feature at ThreadUp, and it led to an immediate increase in the order conversion rate. And the table that you're seeing over here is actually the operational or the transactional data that was required for the product feature to work. And if you this is good enough for the application to work, but then if you try to think of how much analytics can you do if you're only capturing this record, you start kind of thinking about a lot of limitations. And this is the point that I was kind of trying to make, that events allow us to contextualize this kind of information in a better way. and 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 I would like to kind of, if I would like to mention, if you are kind of thinking about creating a tracking plan or capturing information about the event, I have actually like when I began thinking about tracking plan, I always used to think about that subject verb object relation, which means that subject being user, favorites, and item. And only about these kind of things I used to capture this information. But then that thought, I felt that it was pretty limiting, because if you look at an event is actually an immutable log of something that had happened, but that event actually connects a lot of entities together. So if I think about an event which is logging a lot of information about all the entities that were um, that were all the entities uh, that were related to that event, we can actually capture a rich information. And this I like to kind of think from this framework, is that if I'm recording any event, I first try to answer who is doing that event. And once I understand the who part, which tends to be a user, I then try to think of what are the necessary information I want to capture for this user. In our case, it tends to be the anonymous ID, the user ID, and an LTV ID, which tells us, okay, what was the lifetime revenue for this user we have collected. And the user would perform the favorite event with certain entity. and that entity would, in our case, would be item. So same, instead of simply tracking the item number with which the user has interacted with, I can capture a kind of a standardized set of information, so that every single event which is around, which interacts with item, I will have the same kind of information collected every single time. And one important aspect of collecting this information is that item, you can think of item name, category, and brand. These are information that I can agree that, okay, I can look up these values and find them out. But then the promotional price or the list price that was shown to the person at the time of the event is something which is some things can be get tricky, because we have dynamic pricing, we do discounting. So it is difficult to rebuild this information if I'm not capturing it at the time of the event. And not just that, if I think about an event, I'll also understand or maybe question myself, where did this event happen? And that is where I could then think about, okay, I need to record some information on what kind of device the person was using. It could be a mobile phone or it could be a browser and whatnot. I could capture the user agent, I can capture the IP address of that device. And then not just device, where on the device. That means, like, if you are on the, if you're browsing on a website, or you're in the mobile app, on which screen or which page. And that information would get captured in the page entity, and the event properties would capture the when piece of it, that what was the event time, the platform on which this event had happened, and a session ID to understand, to link all these, link a group of events together into one session ID. So while thinking about like a data contract, I identify these as the key elements. Like, first, understand the who, where, when, what, and how aspects of an event, and always try to think of entities wherever you can add, because entities, they help you to promote standardization, and also they become reusable. And once you have identified the entity and the event relationship, you are in a good place to think about the schema definition of your entities and as well the event. You can specify the field names, the type. You can add a description so that, like, this less ambiguity. And not only that, you can also specify certain constraints. And apart from this, versioning your contracts also helps, because then it allows you to capture the event payload for the same event, but then slightly different variations, because there could be some changes with other application are still trying to catch up. So versioning allows you to do that. And finally, having an owner allows the data producers, if they have any kind of questions, like, for example, they are working on a change and they want to discuss with whom they should discuss about this change, the ownership information helps them to trace to whom they should contact. And that was the, like, this was kind of the framework or the thought process I used to kind of craft data contracts. And this is a, I would imagine, an ideal version of, if I have to represent this information uh, in a language which machines can understand, I could use JSON or YAML. And this could be an kind of a representation of that data contract. So if you think, if you see over here, the data contracts can have a type to differentiate between, is it a description for an event or for an entity. You could have namespace added to it. You can have the version number. You would have properties, and then data types, and you could also specify whether these are required or optional, and you can set certain constraints. And along with the events, you are specifying which entities are you expecting with this event, and also their version numbers. And once you have these events, like, once you have these data contracts created in a language that programming languages can understand, it can allow you to actually build your own event collector, and what this event validator, and what that event validator would do is, every single time event collector receives an event from any of the producers, the event validator could fetch the data contract from the registry. It could validate the payload, and then if everything looks good, it will land in your data warehouse. If anything is wrong, it will get thrown into an S3 bucket. And this kind of validation mechanism is your kind of the guardrail which prevents any kind of unexpected changes into the upstream changes landing in your warehouse, which would minimize a lot of surprises that our pipelines would have to face. Uh, and this could be like, if I have to create a sample event to represent the favorite payload, this is what it could look like based on the contract we discussed earlier. And as compared to like one of the another kind of the side effect of thinking about event and entities paradigm is that then uh, you kind of get a very fair idea of where to look up any specific field, because you would understand user ID would always be present under the context user structure, and IP address would be under devices. So it helps you to develop that mental model of how your event payload would look like. And in case the data producers are kind of publishing something which is not meeting your expectations, then the event validator would stop, and this will never land in your warehouse. So this kind of gives us a good protection over the events that we are collecting. Now, one thing which is like all the things that we discussed till now, that was a technical solution for collecting your events in the way you are expecting to. But there's one kind of process like challenge over here, is that if you think of, in hindsight, if I think about what I should capture about favorite, it becomes very easy for me to kind of understand and link things together. But then if I am here, the journey for evolving to capturing this information till this information is can get pretty challenging, because now you have to understand what are the needs of your business that they want to analyze this data on. So this requires a lot of back and forth communication. And in order to smoothen that process out, I loosely try to follow this approach. And what it helps me with that is that, like, if whenever a product manager reaches out to me and they give me a brief about, hey, look, we are kind of trying to release this feature and we need your help with the event tracking. So my first question to them always be, okay, can you tell me what's your success criteria about this product feature? And once they give like share those things, it helps me to understand what are the existing things that I could use and what are the gaps. And specifically, if it's a new product feature, I kind of ask them to show certain prototypes from the design team. Once I get these prototypes, I partner with the data science team, which is the analytical partner for our company. And then we brainstorm on a lot of metrics that we both think would be useful to measure the success of this feature. And this discussion is helpful because, as a part of the discussion, I understand that if I have to collect all this kind of data, who my data producers would be, so that when I'm crafting my data contracts, I can reach out to them and have a brief discussion. Once I craft my initial versions of the data contracts, I kind of work closely with the engineers. And this discussions and this collaboration with the engineers who are the actual data producers for me, having this conversation is the most kind of the fruitful discussions I have in this process. The reason being, my initial version of the data contract could be a very wish list kind of a list, where it would possibly not be feasible for them to send me all that data. So we undergo certain iterations to identify, to meet all the criteria that I have. And another benefit of talking to engineers specifically when they are working on the feature development is that if I have some elaborate requests, they are able to accept those kind of requests because they have not completed the code. If I go back to them once they have finished building the feature, I've seen some resistance because for a lot of information which technically tends to be contextually rich that I ask from them, they have to rethink and rework on the implementation. So it's all the time beneficial if you can talk with them little early in the process. And the advantage I get is that because now they are super comfortable with understanding why are we tracking, when the exactly event should get triggered, they get very comfortable with understanding the event payload, and they themselves do a lot of testing on their self, which saves a lot of back and forth cycles for me. And once they give me the sign off, I then verify the event tracking implementation on a staging in environment. I build the metrics and then share that with the data science team. And they would verify the metrics, give me a sign off, and then everything is ready. We go back to the product manager and then tell them that, okay, we are all set. You can launch the test. And then we go from there. So, to recap everything that we discussed, the key insights so that we could learn from Jay's journey was that had helped him to achieve the operational excellence that he was expecting was first, like we start with decoupling the data, and the way we decouple data is using events. Uh, and now, because we have already separated that input feed, we can ask for more. We can enrich the event payload using entities. And the reason we do entities is that it promotes standardization. And to make all these things work together, we specify data contracts, because data contracts adds the clarity that is needed for the data producers to send us the right information in the right format. And one important thing to understand with this concept of event tracking with data contracts is that like the technical piece is just one half of the solution. We need to align on the technical solution and whatever process works for your team, because this involves a lot of discussions so that you understand exactly what you need to track. And until and unless you have figured out that process piece, it will be a half-baked solution, and you'll have a complex implementation which will not lead to the results that you're expecting. And if you're doing event tracking, there are some challenges that you should always keep in mind. Is always rely on server side tracking as much as you can, because the biggest advantage is that if something goes wrong, you are most likely talking to one engineer or one team who can help you out and fix things. And the moment they fix things, you'll start receiving the data in the format you're expecting. But then it's expected that every single event, specifically a lot of actions are that can only be captured at the client side, you'll still have to implement certain amount of client side tracking. But then when you implement client side tracking, you need to be always kind of aware of your data will be underreported, primarily because a lot of requests on the browsers, they get blocked by ad blockers. And specifically, if a person is using a mobile app or browsing on the mobile browser and the person is moving around, because of the network issues itself, the tracking request can fail. And if and the one thing which specifically applies only for mobile app is that and this is the reason you should have a thorough testing step before you plan the release, is typically the mobile apps has a release lag of close to 2 weeks. So if you identify that something was missed, you'll have to wait for at least 2 to 3 weeks for you to start collecting the right kind of data. So in sum, after Jay implemented, figured out, he cracked the solution, he figured out how to do it in the right way. Jay was less stressed and he had like more free time to work on the high impact projects and excel in his career. And one thing which I, not related to the event tracking piece, but just a personal mantra that I follow and I wanted to share with you all, is that and I'll try to explain that with the photography domain, because I found that it's kind of similar to what data engineers do. So if you imagine that you're looking at a very beautiful photograph, and maybe I can share this. Like, this is a photograph that is captured by one of my friend. He's like really awesome astro photographer. So, and I was talking to him one day, and then I kind of, the way he was explaining me, all the things he does to come up with this photo matches a lot with what data engineers do. He'll click a photo, the photo would be in a raw format, he'll do some kind of post processing, filtering, and eventually he'll get to a result that could be mind blowing. So similarly, uh, I like, by intrigued by that interest, um, I follow a great wildlife photographer named Jairaj TP, and he kind of uploaded a beautiful picture of a kingfisher bird. And someone in the comment asked him that, "Sir, can you tell me what camera equipment did you use to capture this photo?" And he did kind of responded to which camera model he was using, but then he left a note saying that, look, camera is just an equipment. If you really want to click beautiful photographs, you need to have the right kind of intention and perception for it. And that thought so much resonated with me, that being a data engineer, we are in such a powerful position that, being close to the raw data, we really understand what all that data is about, and we also understand the engineering piece of it. And by working very closely to the analytical partners, we also understand their need. So you are in a strong position to actually suggest a lot of ideas that can be eventually be an input to the metrics that needs to be computed. And once you have the right kind of metrics, which are very high signal and low noise, they can help to uh, like reveal data patterns, which eventually would help you to make some insightful decisions on it. So that is what kind of I was thinking. I wanted to kind of touch upon is that in data engineering we talk a lot about the tools, be it Spark or DBT and whatnot. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't champion your tools. You should, because the tools make you more productive and efficient. But then a really strong piece of data engineering comes from the effectiveness of how you operate. So if you're working on something and you're not very clear of why you're building this data set and how it is supposed to be used, I would ask you to step back, seek that clarity once you have the idea, and only then you move forward with. And if you're interested in kind of learning about data contracts a bit more, I have linked some resources on the slide, specifically the driving data quality with data contracts. It's a book by Andrew Jones. Uh, you can read this book. It has a very detailed implementation level details if you want to implement data contracts in your company, and if you want to look at how a production level data contract could look like, you can check out what PayPal has shared in one of the templates. With that, I'll open the floor for questions, and thank you so much for listening.
Okay, that was awesome. There's so much information in there. Uh, so there's a couple of comments. That metaphor with the photography
Mhm.
and intent is fantastic. Let's scroll. Okay, first question. Well, actually, there are several questions about slides. How can people get with you? Can they get the slides? Are they available to be shared out?
Yeah, so I can share the link if there's
Okay.
a formal medium. I'll do it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, share the link, or I'll just say if people can reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we'll do one of the two. Uh, what if? So Nestor's asking, what if we're not able to request more contextualized data um, to design the data contracts? And he says most of the time we don't have a say in how the data is sent to us. And I'm not sure what his context is, but if you're not at a SaaS company, right? If you're dealing with a vendor, you basically just get whatever the API is spitting out, if it's an API, because it might be a CSV, it might be an email. You just kind of get whatever. I've had the experience where we had a contract that the data would come a certain way, and it just didn't. And there wasn't, I guess, in that type of a scenario, which is I'm kind of reading into what Nestor's asking. what can you do to kind of, I guess, facilitate the data contract?
Um, in my personal experience, I would touch upon two things. One is mostly if I'm getting that kind of data from the vendors, most of the times I've seen that they send they already send me a lot of enriched information,
Mm-hmm.
and I just have to figure out what is the meaningful information for me to consume. But then there can be situations where they are breaking the contracts, and the kind of so if someone is breaking the contract, even if you have implemented your own version of data contracts, it's possible that the data producers are not sending, and you'll not receive that information, like everything will get invalidated. So if that is the case and your goal is to prevent unexpected failures, then you'll have to figure out some kind of mechanism to either run certain pre-checks before you begin your pipeline, or you can have your own mini version of the data contracts. But with vendor implementation, I think that it can get too complicated, but then having some kind of a pre-check mechanism at least will save unexpected failures. But then if someone is breaking the contract, then I don't think so like you can do much about that.
Okay. And then is the kind of bad data always sifted and deleted, or is there an approach to clean it or try to recover it?
Yeah, so the reason I log that data in a bucket, so that I can at least leave an opportunity for recovering if anything is recoverable.
Okay,
So yeah.
cool. How involved is product in the defining of the contract? Is that primarily a conversation between the data engineers and the engineers?
Product, at least in our company, product is less involved. They care
Okay.
much about the delivery of the product feature, and it's the analytics team and the data engineering team. They are responsible for kind of capturing all the data which is required to capture the metrics which will report on the success or failure.
Um, Next question. Out of curiosity, what changed about your work when your title changed from data engineer to staff software engineer? I feel the line is blurred between the formal responsibilities between the two, especially at the more senior levels.
uh, yeah, like so I didn't so I feel that simply the title change, be it had been staff data engineer or staff software engineer, so the later part doesn't matter. What matter is the staff title. So the staff title changes the responsibility in a way where I have to now also think about what my team is doing and kind of try to create new projects. So one example of that could be, I have actually personally achieved a lot of success in improving the quality of our data in the product domain, but our operations domain do not do things the way we are doing in product. So actually I'm now creating a project so that our operations vertical can also get into using event tracking and data contracts. So like I try to kind of also think about new projects that I could create.
Cool. Um, Next question. Last year, there was a lot of talk around data contracts, but this year it seems to have died down. Is it due to the fact that this year the interest moved towards the next shiny thing, leaving contracts behind? What's your experience?
uh, I Okay, I feel that we have not scratched the surface with data contracts, and the biggest challenge I face is that, like, and that's what that I have also touched upon in my presentation, is that technical solution is just one part. Following that process that works for your team is second. Like that's also like half part of the solution. And because we are being doing data engineering work in a certain way for quite some time, it's kind of little challenging to say that, okay, I want to do things in a certain way. I want to request for more data because the expectation is you wrangle the data, whatever you get, you create metrics, all the responsibility is on you. But then uh, that's the that is where I think, because you are asking for a process change, which is kind of difficult to move. And I can also kind of throw in an anecdote is that internally at ThreadUp, we are using Snowplow for implementing data contracts. But then the funny thing is, when we started using Snowplow, we didn't use Snowplow for the data contract feature. We use Snowplow for like it's kind of giving us high, like enrich data and all those kind of things. It's doing a lot of things out of the box. But because the product was designed in a certain way that we can repurpose that to be our data, like the event validation and specifying the data contracts, so we kind of pivoted using Snowplow for that. And recently I got in touch with Chad, who's kind of building Gabble.io.
Hmm.
And he's also kind of doing a great work in building things. But the only reason I couldn't kind of move forward with trying out his technology was the process changes. Because we are already on Snowplow,
Hmm.
we have kind of started developing and working in certain manner. Now it's too difficult for me to kind of
Right.
say that, okay, change the process, let's try out this technology.
No, I can kind of follow up to that. So let's actually follow up to that, but this question is related to. So Jonathan's asking, how do you maintain and enforce a contract? And he says, I'm used to a DBT flow, which I picked up on that too, right? You can use a DBT test. Some of those criteria that you identified at the beginning, there's out of the box DBT tests for those kinds of things, which you could use DBT testing to kind of enforce a contract. Is that enforcing a contract? But he's curious about um, maybe another approach outside of DBT um, with production systems that exist. Oh, he's saying question answered Snowplow. That's the
Okay.
answer.
Okay.
So if you're not, so let's say you're not on Snowflake, is there an open source tool that you would like? Let's say someone wanted to know zero experience with data contracts inspired by the last 45 minutes. Snowflake isn't really an option, right? So they're looking at something that's basically free. Is there like an open source? What's like the quick and dirty implementation prototype?
um I would recommend that because there are two pieces. One is the technical problem and the process. I
Mm-hmm.
would say that if you're a very small team, and if verbal contract itself like can
Mm-hmm.
work really well, maybe just try doing that. And one aspect to it was, if you like look at this thing,
Uh-huh.
actually, the reason initially I kind of signed up for Snowplow was, in a hackathon I built an event validator using something like this. And I was like, okay, if I have these rules coded in some way, and I just basically write a small script who can verify event payload against some schema and give me a yes or no, that could like literally work for me. And I was able to do it in one hackathon. Uh, but then the only reason we signed up for Snowplow was, okay, I don't have to build an event collector and this and that. I get everything out of the box. And because we are a lean team, it makes sense for us to buy versus building things in house. So that was so. Maybe if you want to even go one step ahead of not kind of relying on verbal contracts, maybe you can try something like this. There's one alternate option is Snowplow. Is actually, there's an open source version of Snowplow available.
Yeah, I realized I misspoke. When you said snowplow, I immediately thought it was a snowflake thing, and it's not.
There's an open source version of Snowplow available, but uh, it's kind of, there are too many pieces from, because it's an event collector, it
Mm-hmm.
has kind of semblance of, it's way too complicated. But yeah, if you only want to implement an event validation mechanism or even a data validation mechanism, but then your focus is not doing your validation post processing, but then you do your validation pre processing, so that the
Right.
moment you start your pipeline, like you're only working with clean data.
Very cool. Um, so stuff to research. Thank you so much. This has been awesome, awesome, awesome.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
All right. Okay. Well, with that, I think we're going to end. And thanks everyone for coming. And it's been a really great conference. We'll see you guys
Okay.
tomorrow. Well,
Yeah.
we've got one more presentation, and then the day's over. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.